Ladies, what's the weirdest fetish a guy has dropped on you all of a sudden with little to no warning? Were you with it or against it? Several years ago I was just talking to this guy on OkCupid. We hadn't even met yet. And he asked me if I'd be okay with erotic hypnosis. I was like, what? And he sends me a book. However, then he tells me that his last girlfriend and he had gotten into this elaborate fantasy roleplay and somehow decided that they were actually hypnotizing each other, and one night she convinced him she was not real and left him sobbing in a corner. And he wanted to keep doing that. Nope. Nope, nope, nope. So this actually happened to my best friend Drew, who is a male. But it's worth sharing. He was fooling around with this girl he had met. And he could not get her off. They screwed countless times. And he would try anything he could to get her off. But he couldn't do it. She claimed the sex was great and never mentioned anything to make it better for her. So finally he just asks if there's anything he can do to get her off. And she says she has a kink but it scares everyone off. He asks what it is and explains that he isn't most guys and he'll do whatever. And she asks, would you be willing to take a sheet on me? I'm kind of weird. But there's something really sexy about having a guy treat me like garbage. My buddy was finally convinced to do said act. And propped over her midsection and lays a huge steamer right on her tits stomach region as she plays with herself. To this day, he says he has never heard any girl come harder than when this turd made landfall on her. We later found out that Drew was not the first person we know she asked to dump on her. Several people we know told us they had been solicited. But only Drew made her dreams come true, I guess. I just recently broke my hand and it's currently in a cast. I posted a photo of me in the cast on my knitting business Instagram. Small following. Almost all women. I got the normal likes from people I interact with. But some weird likes and new follows from guys as well. One commented asking how bad the break was. I got messages like, how did you injure yourself? And how many fingers are in the cast? And can I sign the cast? I pulled up a couple profiles to see what sort of accounts these guys follow. And yep. Lots of casts. That's the day I learned that cast fetishes are a thing. That's also the day I learned to be very careful with my hashtags. Eater, although you've all given me great ideas. The hashtags I used were not so creative. In fact, I went back and checked and the only cast related hashtag I used was broken hand. Not even anything about the cast itself. Not me. But friend told me a story about one of her Tinder dates. Fairly boring. Non-sexual first date convo. She gets up to go to the bathroom. And as soon as she sits back down, dude is like, so how do you feel about pee play? Like, would you pee on me? I guess her going to the bathroom was enough of a segue for this guy. Guy told me he likes tall women. Really tall women. Wanted me to dress up and play at being a giantess. We were halfway through our first cup of coffee. One guy wanted me to berate his small pen 15 and tell him how worthless it was. I didn't want to do it. Because I have mad pen 15 respect. But I did because I also believe in embracing your kinks. Guy here, but this one confused the crap out of me. I started dating this girl and at first things were normal, but she started picking fights with me and then having angry sex. It got to the point that she literally refused to have sex without a loud shouting match first. It was really hard to break up with her because when I told we were through she thought it was foreplay. Eventually I had to just ghost her. I was dating a guy who confided in me after I confided in him some of my more ethically ambiguous fetishes, that he wanted us to have daughters and raise them to be our sex toys. No thank you. Adam. Not me, but a friend of mine was talking to this guy who said, before we go any further, I need to come clean about something. Please don't think I'm strange. I've got a really weird fetish. Instantly we think it's gonna be something extreme. Maybe involving bodily fluids. I don't want to kink shame, but just something downright gross. He says, I need to be wearing a fleece. Question mark? Patagonia was his preference. It's like innocent compared to the ones in this thread, but just bizarre. Knife stuff. No warning at all. I knew he was kinky and slightly weird, but not like dangerously weird until he was having difficulty reaching orgasm. I said something along the lines of how can I help you finish, and he slides a fake magician's knife out of the nightstand next to him and said he had a stabbing fetish. Wanted me to pretend to be murdered by him. It was a nuclear red flag, but there I was. He's already inside me. So I'm like, whatever. I'll go along with this. He came. I left. The next day my abdomen was totally beat the duck up. Bruises all over my torso and chest from him jamming a stupid plastic knife into me. It opened my eyes to how sexual stabbing scenes are in horror films, as he explained that's where the fetish began. From growing up watching shit like Halloween. Never again though, shudders. My best friend told me about how she had been dating this guy for a few months and they took a camping trip together. They were having sex in the tent and he puts his forearm down on her neck and starts cutting off her air supply. She freaked and thought he was going to kill her, to later find out he had a choking fetish he never told her about. Edit, since more than one person has asked. No. The relationship did not last. I had a friend who told me some Tinder dude brought a backpack of fetish gear to their first date. And was surprised that she found it weird. He was into blood play and wanted to make little cuts all over my body with a really pretty knife. Yeah, no thanks. My boyfriend likes people to watch him pee. Not peeing on people or things. Just peeing in the toilet normally. It's weird, but honestly I'm into weirder. I have been dating this man for 2 years that I met on POF. About 6 months in. He told me he had a balloon fetish. He said he had been jacking off with them since he was a teen. And his fantasy was to have actual sex on one. He said he had always been afraid to tell anyone. But he sensed that I would be the type of person who wouldn't run away. At first I was like OMG. But then I was like, duck it. What's the harm in trying something new? So he brings out this huge 6-foot long balloon that he has to blow up with an air pump. The thing is huge. And he tells me he owns a ton of them. All shapes and sizes. At first it was weird trying to straddle that humongous balloon and leaning over it so he could duck me doggy style on it. All the while being terrified that it was going to pop in my face at any given moment. But I got used to it and we do it often. It has popped in my face quite a few times and we both get a good laugh. I figure if it makes him happy then why not? Also, if anybody has any suggestions on new things to try with the balloons, let me know. My first partner was very experienced and knew what he wanted. Early into our physical relationship, he told me that he wanted me to slap him and tell him how he was a bad person. It was difficult for me to get on board with that. I'm a very nice person. What could I even say? I bet you don't recycle. I once met a guy on Tinder who, out of nowhere, asked me if I could duck his dog while he watched. I was very against it. There was one guy who was really into having a free household. Meaning, I guess, sex and nudity in front of the children. He was kinda vague about what he was suggesting. So I kept on trying to steer things back into the realm of sanity and be all, yeah, sexy times. Nakedness, once the kids are in bed. But then he went into this elaborate fantasy about me showering with our teenage daughter, not actually ours. This was still in the realm of fantasy, and I was like, wait. You're actually getting off on the idea of the kids being involved. Or at least witnessing all of this. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, I'm out. I don't have a ton of limits. But kids is one. He also kept calling me mommy. Even after I asked him to stop. I actually have a child who is still young enough to call me mommy. If there is one guaranteed way to turn me off, that would be it. If I recall. He also referred to his big dig as his duck stick. That would be a hard no. Was seeing a lawyer while I was in college and he was into big dig shaming and a chastity cage. I really liked him so I indulged him some. Kept his little big dig cage keys on my keyring. The whole shebang. But he could not separate fetish and life. So our whole relationship turned into fetish instead of an actual relationship. He wanted to paint my toenails, then ejaculate on them. I was down as long as I approved the color. He did a great job. Even put little hearts on the big toes and gave me a foot rub. It didn't do much for me sexually, but I got a pedicure and we had fun. Edit. He did wait for the polish to dry first. There was some dirty talk, though mostly I just wiggled my toes at him. It made him laugh and turned him on. It was fun. Not sure if this counts, but I worked as a pro dominatrix for a couple years and my ex-girlfriend and I would often do duos together as it was a nice way of spending time together making money and we had great chemistry together as doms. Years later she is still a dear friend. She hits me up letting me know she has a really well-off client who had a very specific breath play fetish. Since I was very experienced with breath play and felt very comfortable doing it safely, she asked if I'd be down to make a couple $100. I get to the dungeon. We smoke weed and wait for the guy. He comes in with a bunch of rolls of plastic. Turns out, he had a very specific fetish for this kind of plastic that was very smooth and soft. It wasn't only a breath play suffocation scene, but he wanted to be totally mummified in said plastic. I'd say he was in his late 50s early 60s, just looked like someone's dad. We spent 2 hours binding him in this plastic, putting plastic over his face until he'd scream his muffled safe word as he'd gasp for air, and then sitting on his mummified metapod looking body and smoke joints on top of him, tickle him, and then ignore him and talk amongst ourselves. It all looked like something straight out of a Dexter scene and honestly it would probably look very creepy to an outsider. This cycle of mummifying him and suffocating him lasted for 2 hours. Until he asked if we could cut him free. Then he jerked off for like 1 minute and blew his load all over the pile of plastic. Weirdly enough, nicest and most normal client I've had. During our aftercare session, this is where you encourage your sub. Tell them how well they did. Cuddle them. And check in with them so they're not traumatized by the scene. He spilled his guts to us. He said he felt out of control in his life and having his breath controlled and wrapped in the plastic made him feel safe and comforted him. Not me. But I heard a story from a friend one time who got with this guy one night and he said I like being a little rough. Are you okay with that? She, without thinking much of it, decides to play along and the dude slaps the shit out of her and says you like that. Itch. She noped out real quick. I was walking to my college and on the way I saw a couple walking in front of me. I was late for my class and when I rushed past them I heard the girl say I knew you were into weird fetishes. But the most I'll do is piss on somebody. Don't even wanna know what the boy said. Was talking to a guy online on a dating site. One of those guys that seemed kind of too good to be true. Out of my league. Good looking. Great job. Owned his own home. Traveled nationally and internationally once a year on vacation. I figured there had to be a catch. He had a cuckold fetish. I'll give him this. At least he was honest about it early on rather than waiting until I was invested in a relationship. He was also very polite about it when I declined. I was seeing this guy a couple of months. At this point we were exclusive and sleeping together, but weren't much more serious than that. One night, we're getting hot and heavy. He's about a millimeter from actually penetrating me when he stops where he's at and asks me, "Do you trust me?" I wasn't sure what that meant so I asked him exactly that. "What do you mean?" He wouldn't explain. He just kept repeating, "Do you trust me?" Eventually I sort of snapped at him and said, "I mean we're literally about to have sex. So yeah, I guess so." "Why?" Without answering he just open palm slapped across the face. Hard. I kicked him out of my house and our relationship dissolved shortly thereafter. The kicker? While we were getting to know each other, he told me his ex was into some really rough stuff and that he hated it. And that, kids, is called projection. Edit. No shame for having kinks. Provided everyone involved is healthy and consenting, and legal. But please don't spring kinks on your partners and definitely don't actively lie about yours if you ever want to try it in the future.